It's the weekly 30/30 trading list. We're finding the best momentum companies on the ASX and identifying those that are set to run. Gary Glover's been through the list, picked out his favourites, and is going to walk us through them. Good morning, Gary. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, Chris.
Coming from sunny Queensland. Looks like the place to be right now.
Very much so.
You've delved into the list. You've been through it. We had the break in Australia Day, so we're running off the data on Wednesday. But it was a strong night in the US while we were closed, so the Aussie market's doing pretty well so far. How have you been through in the list when you look at the momentum companies over the last quarter?
So probably similar last week, actually, probably a sort of harder list there to sort of identify great trades. Obviously, everything has run quite a lot. So, when they've run so hard like this, you're kind of waiting for pauses, waiting for sort of consolidations and hopefully waiting for sort of some light volume retracements. And then if they hold up quite well and then they go again, then you're sort of trying to move with that momentum there. So I noticed like your number one on the list here is WR1, which is Winsome Resources, which has obviously been on a bit of a tear here. That's what we're looking for, Chris, is that little that little flag pennant in there.
Those little pauses.
Yeah, it's a strong leading stocks, literally having a 4 or 5 day, maybe 6 day sort of pause and starting to go again here. And then we pop, obviously with a little bit of a pullback back to the range again, still holding above here. So the key there is to sit on top of the previous sort of high. Sort of, I'd like to use the body of the candles rather than the ends here. So I'd like to sort of use a closing sort of opening marks there. And yeah, you can see there we came back, sit on top of that, and then we've gone again. So still pretty constructive. Look, maybe getting a bit long in the tooth here now, but as we know, Chris, the leading stocks, they continue to lead and they often will push a lot further than anyone anticipates. So again, we're just waiting for pauses in these leading stocks, and looking to sort of find a sort of safe entry on those sort of consolidations there.
So WR1's definitely been the strongest and been up there for many weeks.
Yeah, so I saw Tourismholdings on the list, number 2. We covered that last week. It's actually holding quite nicely for a new stock, which is interesting for an IPO to be doing pretty well. It hasn't been too many great ones recently. So that is definitely just sort of something to keep an eye on, this THL, sort of starting to break out. You almost might sort of say here. If it finishes where it is today here, that'd be a new high. So, just that's interesting here. Just it's a good sector, new company as well. Definitely want to keep an eye on there. Nuix is one that sort of had a pretty decent pop here. We talked about this sort of breaking out of a range here. So now, we've seen some reasonably healthy volume, Chris, all the way up to the high here. And then we've had a little bit of a pullback here now, only sort of 1, 2, 3 days down, but the volume's pretty light here. So that's what we want to see. We want to see a little pause, some little consolidation here. This one sort of kind of failed here, but we did see some pretty heavy volume in there as well. So we just want to see a nice move up here, a bit of a pause here. You'd like to sort of see it a little bit more sideways than down. But those are things we've sort of got to look for here with these leading stocks. Just waiting for a little sideways pause in there.
So sideways pause, moderate to low volume, maintaining really high in the recent range.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you just want to sort of see it, not come back too deep. It's hard. If they've had a pretty decent run, they can have a somewhat decent reaction. But if you get a nice little tight flag, like high tight flags, which obviously you're looking for, that's ideal. That they're not that common, but yeah, we're just looking for a nice sort of tight consolidation, or just something where the pullback is mild and the volume's mild, and then it starts to sort of get kind of build again. Weebit Nano is another one that's actually had a pretty good run there. The only thing sort of for me here, this stock here, is it's sort of run, and then the volume's sort of coming in. So I personally don't like volume coming in late. So that's kind of like the smart money's sort of been riding it here, and then everyone's, this might be a case of, smart money getting out, exit into this strength here. So yeah, so just be careful with that one there when I see volume coming late like that. Resimac was on the list there. It's had a nice move here. Some pretty good volume through this phase here. So good volume all the way up here. Had a little bit of a pullback here, but the one thing was what we're seeing here so far, it's reasonably tight and pretty low volume here. So love to see it just sort of tag below that recent low 126, maybe, come back to 124 or something there, showing no volume in there. We get a little uptick on volume. That could be worth looking at and sort of following there. But just got to make sure you be patient, let the stock sort of set up correctly, go from there. MLX is sort of interesting here. Just we got a little bit of an overlapping trend here, which is sort of can mean many things here, but probably the most interesting aspect here is the volumes are up here. So we're actually seeing some decent volume in there. So a decent reaction there again, decent volume again, somewhat decent reaction, but there's still pretty sizable volume here. So the buying really hasn't sort of slowed here. So although this is maybe a bit choppy here, a bit over, corrective in nature there, just the buying's been pretty robust. So I prefer to sort of see them downward decline there, but we saw with our XJO here recently, we sort of went straight up and then we did that sort of sideways upwards consolidation and then we just popped again. So sometimes your consolidations can be on this upward grind and then go again. So definitely wanted to keep an eye on there. XTX has had some decent volume there, but again, maybe looking a little long here, maybe due for a pause. AIS sort of was one there. It's had a few little pauses in there, like a little BCP in here, little ABC, little pause in there, pretty light volume, all through here. So that's the type of thing there. If we've had a nice impulsive move, we want to see a little breather like this, then it can sort of go again. But this one's a little small, so I'd be a little careful in there. RSG was sort of one that we've spoken about recently, just keeps ticking away, this one here. So pretty solid so far. The volume's still pretty robust as well, pretty solid through here. Even the sort of some of these down days here, we're just not seeing any volume at all. So still looks pretty robust there, Resolute. So nothing negative there. Starpharma Holdings is sort of one that I just sort of thought keep an eye on there. Volumes have been light on the upside there, which is a bit negative. But we are sort of seeing more of a corrective decline here, but bit patchy sort of stock, which is always makes it difficult. Adairs has sort of had a nice pop, had a bit of a consolidation there. I actually think these sort of retail stocks are sort of ones to watch here in reporting season, Chris, because we've had retail sales have been flying, and everyone's waiting for them to cool off, and they haven't. But at some point here, obviously, with that inflation number here that we got last week, and for Australia here, that probably means that our governor should lift rates. I mean, I know he's way behind the curve there, but it should be, should mean that rates should go a little bit higher there. We just might put a little bit of pressure on retailers in the future, but so far they've been pretty robust there. I think they'll report pretty well as well here. So sometimes people ask, how do you trade reporting season? Sometimes you can, like if you get an upgrade in the stock, as we know, Chris, normally that means the stock they'll jump, but they can keep going post that. But if it's sometimes these cyclical sort of stocks, if they have a pretty good period, like a retail stock there, you can basically sort of gap up into that, into the good news. So they've been running here, those retail stocks. They're probably going to report pretty well. Almost sort of, that's the sort of things I might sort of see. The market might gap up into those positive earnings reports, but that might be a case of buy the rumor, sell the fact. Everything, all the good news is laid out, turn around, but that might be a bit of a peak as well. So that's the one thing I'd be watching reporting season is that, just watching for stocks that sort of run up and then gap up and then reverse. That's something we might see a little bit of this reporting season ahead. Kogan, yeah, it's been somewhat positive to here. The only thing is, just seeing a bit of volatility up here. That's the only thing I don't like about it. Sort of decent pullback here, retest again. Just like to sort of see it, climb up nicely and pull back in a tight manner, and just don't like to sort of see volatility after we've already had a pretty good run. AX1 is another one of these retailers which has had a great run here. Again, might be running up and gapping up into here, so just be careful here. That's exhaustive sort of type volume there, big gap up after a strong move. So when you see those big sort of big volume exhaustive days, that they can sort of kill a trend. That's kind of like your retail punters sort of fly in here at the end after they feel like it's safe to go in, and then that's when all the selling comes in. So
you're talking about the volume happening midway or after a rally as opposed to out of a base.
Yeah, so you've been running, and then all of a sudden you sort of see that might be some good news, and then all of a sudden the earnings come in or whatever it is. So, but then that get a big wide range and you get exhaustive, and when you see that big volume spike, that is not this often. You want to see a volume spike early. So we just saw. I was talking about earlier that ASN lithium stock here has just sort of come off the floor here. That's just gapped up here early on a change of circumstances there. So obviously, like they've I think an offtake agreement there. So when you sort of good big volume here early in the move, then that's good. What you don't want to see is the big volume sort of coming in sort of late here. So that AX1 has just had a pretty strong run here, all the way up here, and then we've got the biggest volume day here on that day there. So that's, to me, that can signal an exhaustive of the trend of this move here, and we saw that here too. That definitely signaled an exhaustion for the last peak as well. So just got to watch those big spike in volumes there. So that's our quarterly momentum. Looking at the weekly, so I saw ERAs had a nice spike there. But interesting sector there, uranium. So saw Paladin's had a nice move as well. That was on their list last week, and Deep Yellow was on the list last week as well. So now we got ERA. So just that sector there starting to move there. I thought Deep Yellow looked pretty good actually there last week. Just had a nice little consolidation, starting to break up. You see Paladin, which is the leader. That's actually broken up to a new high as well. So kind of pretty constructive signs there. So definitely keep an eye on that uranium sector there. There's a bit. We've had a few stocks in the last couple of weeks hit that weekly launch pad there. So I thought number 3 on the list was Frontier Digital FDV, and I know if you guys quite like this stock here. It's obviously growth there, so it's obviously been under the pump here recently, but yeah, we saw down here sort of like a bit of a false break, you might say. Probably a few more days down the low there, but started to build here, bit of a consolidation there, and just started to pop out of here. So it's a bit of a pop out of the range here, which is pretty constructive. Sort of gone to a new high, had a few days up, and then we've sort of consolidated there. We just sort of started to kick up again. So this is definitely one that I think looks quite good to me. Looks very constructive. If inflation continues to ease in the States and growth stocks, started to move up quite a bit this week. We're just looking at Tesla chart this earlier. That's obviously had a pretty nice bounce off the lows there. Even the Microsoft sort of news, which was probably not the best result, market recovered after it sort of dropped away. So just, sort of US reporting season seems to be taking some of these results in its stride here. So just I think some of those growth stocks are definitely starting to perform a lot better here. So definitely a sector I'll be looking at seriously there. Ampol was sort of one here with, this is sometimes this is where your biases can get in the way, Chris, is like I saw this make a nice sort of high low here, and then it broke through what I call a little B wave. So broke through $29. I thought, oh, it's, you know, Ampol's kind of a boring sort of stock, doesn't move that much, but it's already moved $2 already in about 5 sessions. So yeah, so don't let your biases get in the way sometimes of your trading signals. If you get a good signal there and there's some good volume there, there's some good healthy volume, yeah, signs of exhaustion at the low, signs of accumulation, good volume here, pull back here, and then the volume sort of come back in again, started to move, and then broken out on good volume here. So yeah, it's a pretty good signal. So yes, sometimes as traders there, we can let our biases get in the way.
Yeah, especially if you're getting fully invested, you're looking and saying, well, how much can this company make? It's a pretty boring, slow-moving company. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So sometimes, you know, you're looking at trying to trade the highest growth ones there, but you know, some of the more sort of stable stock can still have pretty decent moves here. And we've seen, particularly in the last year here, some of the value shares have probably had some of the biggest moves in the market. So that's why sometimes you've got to put your prejudices aside there and just trade the signals. WiseTech is looking pretty interesting as well. Again, another growth stock there. Just had a bit of an ABC correction there, starting to move here. The volume's been reasonable in here, so just hasn't been much of a pause in there, you know. But yeah, this is definitely one to sort of keep an eye on there. So it is looking pretty constructive. Zip. Saw a lot of people talking about this during the week. I just, you know, the first thing that sort of came to my mind when it was, you know, even after it had a big day and everyone was celebrating, I thought to myself, well, be careful with Zip here. It's just, this is a classic case of sort of yesterday's leaders. You know, they struggle to get going here. So sort of, you know, stock's been a downtrend for a long, long time. And so many people have bought the stock, they're underwater. So anytime it has a bit of a rally, it's going to track some sort of profit taking or sort of getting back to square. And we just know in the past, history tells us that, you know, the new leadership of group, you know, it won't come from the old leaders. You know, it'll come from a new group. So so we've got to be careful trading yesterday's leaders there. They can be laggards for quite a while. So I see Zip's had a pretty decent correction there. There's a few in there too. I think Sezzle, something similar, had a decent move, decent pop, and then it's got hit again. The only one that I thought looked okay in there was Tyro, slightly different than the other two there. Has been sort of someone, you know, obviously Westpac did look at this initially, but yeah, I don't know if I'd be rushing in here, but this is probably the one that looks more constructive out of those three for me. VEA was sort of one that I thought looked pretty good here, just the weekly setup. I had covered this in the weekly report, but two things I see there is that, yeah, pretty big volume. So seeing this is a corrective sort of setup here on the weekly. If we look at our long-term setup there, we can see this is nice and tight here, sort of sitting above the high there. Nothing negative about that. I mean, the odds favour this going to a new high. I see in the States a lot of the energy stocks are still pretty strong. So even though the oil prices had a bit of a cool off here, energy is still pretty robust there. All stocks are still amongst the leadership group in the US there. So just keep that in mind. Suncorp was one that's had a nice little move here. So again, you know, it's I know it's sort of in the top 50 sort of stock here, but yeah, it's had a nice little three-way pullback, building up here, and had a bit of a pop here. So even the big ones can have these sort of moves. Well, I thought this was interesting here. This sort of that Ioneer sort of had some pretty good news there, but then it's drawn some selling here. So basically, it's kind of retreated all the way back here. I just keep an eye on the stock here. I think it might sort of build again. That's pretty significant news. I think in the States it moved like 50% here. I think I only moved half of that here. But yeah, just sort of one to keep an eye on there. Perpetual has had a decent move as well, sort of been building. So I like to look at that, but it's going to be a slow mover. That was sort of mainly it there, Chris. I think the last one there was number 30 was SG Fleet, which has had a pretty decent move. The one that I did trade was SIQ. That was a nice little VCP in there. That has sort of got to here. The only thing I'd sort of be watching for is we are sort of getting close to like the old swing low there. So that there's the levels that I look for.
So that profit target, or just tighten stops and be wary?
That was my profit target, was just under there. So I got a bit nervous there last week, and I just wanted to after I saw that inflation number, I thought I was very long, so I just thought I wanted to sort of trim back my portfolio by a third. So I did trim some of those, even though I thought the chart looked fantastic. But that's just an area to watch for there. Just oftentimes I'll go back to swing lows, so just got to watch those sort of zones there. Particularly in these sort of markets at the moment, we're definitely seeing kind of more sort of range bound activity there. Some days look like your portfolio is just sort of treading water. It's just not sort of, you cannot move for 2 or 3 days, and then you'll get a bit of a movement, and then it treads water for a few days. It's a bit of a choppy market there. That's basically sort of that's the 30-30 list there. There's only one little lesson there. I was listening to a podcast on the way down here, Chris, and it was Kobe Bryant podcast. It was actually on School of Greatness, which I love that podcast. I'll probably listened to it a couple of years ago, but haven't listened to it for a while, and just made me think of like Kobe was talking about how they lost the Boston series, and the next season he reviewed every game on 80 games over the season, reviewed every game, basically rewound all the videotape, went through the fine-tooth comb sort of things they could do and better, and just reviewed the season, all the games, and then from that point forward, next season he's reviewed games, and he was talking with teammates about even pulling apart some aspects of video and showing them how to what they should have done better. But it just kind of made me think about trading as well. But the one thing we don't do enough of in trading is review our trades. This is one thing I'd say to everyone out there who's learning to trade, who's serious about trading, is that we should go back probably the last month and look at the trades you did a month ago and go and review them. And every month, just go back and review your trades. So probably I would leave it a month after you've traded them. But go back and review them and just sort of look at them and look at how you entered them, how you exited them, and see what you can learn from that process there. I think you'll find that quite revealing. You'll potentially get more out of that than most other trading lessons as well. But yeah, definitely just think it's a really key thing for trading is to go and review. It's probably a forgotten art, something that most traders don't do enough of. Me personally, I probably don't do enough of it, but the times that I have done it, I can easily say it's been quite a monumental experience for me and a game changer for the times that I have gone through and reviewed extensively. So definitely something as a trader we should be doing more of and encourage more of. And finding buy signals is easy. It's the selling part is the hard part.
And sticking to the rules. So if you've done this a few times, and I remember quite a few times you have, and we've talked about the results you found after it, would you say from your experience that a month is a good amount of time where you can look back at the trade? It's recent enough that it's not completely ancient history, but it's long enough where you can sit there and analyze your entry rules and think, hang on a second, why was I doing that? I was overexposed. Was I cheating my rules? Do you find that month is that nice happy medium between long enough but short enough?
Yeah, that's right. And you want to sort of see what unfolds after you left the trade as well. So if you review the trade a couple of days later, you don't really know what's potentially left behind or whether it was a good decision or not. So a month later, we'll probably tell you a little bit more about trading that, if you suddenly find that you're exiting the trades too early and they kept running, then you might need to alter some of your rules there, or your perspective, or just the knowledge that you're exiting too early. So maybe so instead of getting out of all your trade, maybe you just get out of some of the trade, like I know Minervini will sort of scale in and then scale out. So these are good things for traders to learn too. So if you can sort of, obviously it's nice to sort of take a bit of profit there when you've had a big move, but if it's looking pretty robust and pretty healthy, you also want to, like that SIQ, there's no reason for me to get out of that trade. I just felt too overexposed in the market and wanted to trim back my portfolio. And yeah, maybe I should have trimmed other things that I was probably less confident about, whereas SIQ, that's been a good trade. The volume's been good setup, great little technique. There was just nothing negative about that sort of setup. So, yeah, so probably would have been better off maybe exiting something else earlier and staying with the good trade there that was already on its way.
Maybe we'll loop back in a month and we can pull that one apart.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for going through the list, Gary. You've supplied us with the best ones you've found in the quarterly momentum and then this week's Launchpad, those ones. So thank you for breaking those down and joining us from sunny Queensland.
Thanks, Chris.
Now, what we've seen here today is Gary has talked about the 30-30 list. We'll try to put that one on screen and the links below. He's also referenced his Tuesday report where he looked at some of these companies that he has picked up and traded in his own portfolios. The link will be on the right-hand side for that playlist of Gary's Tuesday videos. And then also on the right-hand side is a link where Gary goes into more detail of different trading strategies, tactics, and also setups, just like he did with talking about reviewing trades just then. And then also on the left is his Twitter handle if you want to follow Gary there.